Today on the People Strategy Forum, we're diving deep into a topic that shapes both leaders and companies from the inside out, the growth mindset. To guide us through this conversation, we're delighted to welcome Karolin Helbig, a leadership consultant whose career journey blends the analytical precision of science with the human touch of emotional intelligence. After starting her career as a scientist, Karolin expanded her impact at McKinsey, advising top executives across diverse industries and regions. Today, she uses her unique blend of analytical thinking and emotional insight to coach leaders on harnessing mindset and emotional intelligence for lasting success. Her approach empowers leaders to transform challenges into personal growth opportunities, driving development, effective teams, and sustainable business success. Please join me warmly to welcome Karolin Helbig to share how the right mindset can capture a leadership's imagination and drive their organizations forward to great success. Welcome, Karolin. As we start off our conversation here, Karolin, I would just love to kind of dive in for our audience so that they can understand, a little bit more about you and your journey as a professional and how you got to where you are today. So, Karolin, I know you're an author, and you come from the heart of a scientist. So, tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I'd love to, and thanks for inviting me, Sam. I started as a scientist, and that was what I always wanted to do when I was back at school. I was dreaming of really understanding how the human being as a biological system is really working deep down to the molecules and the hormones and so on. So what I studied was human genetics, human biology, and my PhD in human genetics. And I did research for 4 years, and then I thought, oh, do I really want to do that forever? Because what I didn't realize when I had this dream of a scientist, that you as a person focus on one single piece, one little piece of the whole mosaic. And then I thought, I really want to broaden my horizon again. And that was the reason for me to join McKinsey as a big consultancy. And I loved working with different clients in different countries, different industries. And actually, I thought it wasn't so different from science because I was trained in understanding complex problems and solving complex problems. And I figured that I really, really love supporting people. And even if you are working on analytical problems, the human side is always important, of course. So the client relationship, that was kind of my sweet spot during my whole McKinsey career. And at some point, I really wanted to make this human side of leadership my explicit focus. So then when I left McKinsey, I really focused on all these skills we need as human beings to really be effective as leaders. Because what I learned is it doesn't help you much to have the most brilliant minds, the most fantastic concept, the best strategy, if you have not the human skills you need to really lead your people.
Right.
So that was traditionally coined soft skills, but actually I think these are the true hard skills or the true power skills. And that's my focus of my work today. And growth mindset is a big part of that.
It's so interesting because my sister, my sister was a scientist, and my sister-in-law also was a scientist, and one of the things I hear from them as far as working in the environment that they used to is that they really hungered for the people or interaction with people and in diverse cultures, in different situations. And when you're in a the analytical mindset of the scientist. I mean, sometimes you can get involved so much in the work that you're not thinking about others. And so, was it somewhat like that for you, Karolin? And did you really hunger for the involvement of working with people?
That's interesting. Actually, when I'm looking back, the time which I spent in the lab, that was I was really part of a team, and actually, in a way, that was my first leadership role, because I led a team of assistants. I had to take care of the medical PhD students and guide them, it was a little bit actually like my later role as a project manager with McKinsey, that I had to manage all the different stakeholders, my professor, and yeah. So in a way, actually, that I wasn't lonely doing research only on my own, and it can be different for other areas of science, of course, but for me it was actually a very social endeavor to do the research. And I learned, for example, with my very difficult to handle professor, I learned a lot about what does it take to be an effective leader, and really make sure that you get to the point where you want to be, because she was really hard to handle. And
so I guess
one of the challenges.
Yeah, so I guess that takes us back, full circle to working with leaders and making sure that they have the correct mindset for their team and to be effective overall. So what are some of the biggest problems that you see with leadership mindset and people that really need help? What are the common issues that you see in with leaders in the marketplace?
I'm not sure if that's really a pattern or a common issue, but if we look the other way around, what would be helpful right now for all the challenges we are facing as leaders? I think this concept, which is not new, coined by Carol Dweck, a growth mindset, is really, really helpful. And if we really embraced it and embodied it and really have it in our DNA, it would help us a lot, because then what would happen is we wouldn't run away from challenges. Actually, we would get curious and, okay, let me learn about this new situation. So we would kind of, instead of turning away and running away, we would turn towards and get curious and investigate with curiosity, and really would commit completely to learning. And that would change a lot, because often what I see is that leaders react more in a way, in a fixed mindset. So they are confronted with something disruptive, something challenging. I mean, VUCA, we have VUCA times 10, right now. And in a fixed mindset, you try to avoid challenges. You don't want to look stupid. So this is not very helpful, because immediately when you're facing a challenge, you have kind of fear reaction in yourself, and that puts your brain in a mode where you can't do your most creative, most expansive thinking. You don't see all the possibilities there are. So in a way, we need to shift boldly towards growth mindset, particularly because of the disruptive world we are in.
Right. And so what I'm hearing from you is that for leaders that are stuck in the fixed mindset, I mean, often they're there because they want to make sure that they look good, they look strong as a leader, and they use some of the common tools that they have and that they've done in the past that have been successful, and to avoid appearing the fool or appearing that they're not strong. But those leaders that really flourish going forward are those that are more vulnerable, those that are open to learning, and that are not afraid of new ideas and innovation. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And who are focused on learning and who don't have a problem admitting that they don't know it all. Of course, we are all learners. We are all works in progress. And the best is that we help each other learn and develop and grow. So it's not about performance and perfection. It's more about let's learn together. And it's not a big issue that I don't know it all. So in a way, yes, they are more vulnerable, but the vulnerability is less a big deal for them than it is when you are in fixed mindset. Because in fixed mindset, it is a big deal because it shows that your capabilities, which are fixed and innate, are not as good as you hope they are. And you try to kind of convey the picture of someone perfect, of someone who who has great capabilities. But if you understand yourself as, okay, I'm evolving, I'm in the process, I'm learning, I'm growing,
yes,
it's okay that where you are right now will not be where you will be tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So it's a journey.
Yeah, I have this. This happens a lot, even in my business. So I have clients that expect me, come to me and expect me to know everything, right? And so I have to explain to them. It's like, okay, my expertise in that area is really deep, and then others, it's I know enough to talk about it, but I want to introduce them to the people on my team that are the deep experts. It's like, if you want to know more about that, you need to talk to Jackson or Gabriella or Howard, which they'll can dive into things much more deeper. I think that it's important for people to be real on their expertise in certain areas and acknowledge experts to really dive into to really get at the root of the problem for people effectively. I think that's just it seems to be good practice. So I think that it's bad to fake your way.
Yeah, it's a great practice, and I think such a helpful practice. And it's not that you kind of reach once and for all growth mindset and that's it. It's more a lifelong practice. We need to encourage ourselves again and again to shift to growth mindset because, for example, fear of failure, that's just natural, and we all fall into fear of failure again and again. And then we need to encourage ourselves, okay, let's not fear the failure. Let's shift boldly to curiosity and see, okay, what happened? What can we learn from that? How can we set up the next best experiment and things like that? So in a way, shifting to growth mindset also is good for our inner state, our inner freedom, our inner peace, because we get rid of so much anxiety and fear of failure, and it's much more enjoyable to work in this mode and encourage everyone in your team to be in this mode, and then it's really a virtuous cycle.
And so, in diving into this more, what should leaders do to develop this mindset? What are some of the first steps that they should be thinking about in developing more of a growth mindset?
Yeah, I think one big thing is to move away from blame. So letting go of blame in any direction. So blaming others and also blaming yourself, and instead moving to kind of a friendly, compassionate curiosity and asking questions. So instead of kind of blaming, I should have known better, you should have done better, things like that. getting curious and asking, okay, what can I learn? What can we learn? What would support us? What would support me to do what I want to do? So it's kind of being aware of the way we are talking to ourselves, we are talking to others, and be very sensitive for any blaming, shaming, any fear, anxiety, and then shift boldly into, okay, let's get curious, let's ask questions. And there are many ways, little tweaks. I think language is really important because language creates reality for ourselves and for others. And Carol Dweck introduced this little tweak of yet. So I don't know, or I don't know yet. I can't do that. I can't do that yet. And this makes such a big of a difference. And this applies to more complex things as well.
Yes, I commonly use that language with my clients when we're talking about performance ratings. It's like they're often thinking like, well, they're this person is not performing. It's like, oh, well, they're not performing yet, right? So what do we need to do to get them on track so they can perform? So things like this, I think that is beautiful, Karolin, as far as thinking about the proper dialogue with our people. And the other thing I want to dive into as well is that you mentioned, as far as I think that having language or crafting language so it's more productive. So a lot of times under conflict, and leaders and managers can resort to anger about the situation, and why did this happen, or why did we have to suffer for this, and instead of asking the right productive questions, as far as well, how can we prevent this from happening again? What can we do to make this a better process, like you were mentioning? So I think that's
Exactly.
wonderful.
And this is not at all sugarcoating or
Mm-hmm.
seeing things just through rose glasses or something like that. It's really a way to make sure that our brain and the brain of others, they are staying in the most useful mode. So
Mm-hmm.
in a way, I think the traditional way of leadership, actually, which I experienced also during my time with McKinsey, this management by fear, I think that's a big misunderstanding of how the human brain works. The moment you inject fear with this language, we need to get it right. If we don't solve this, we are
Yeah.
gone. We need to innovate, or we won't survive. Things like that. And the moment you talk in that way, everyone experiences fear in a way, and this
Mm-hmm.
kind of it activates the sympathetic nervous system,
Yeah.
and in a way your cognitive capacity shrinks. You kind of see a narrower piece of the world. You can't be as expansive in your thinking and creativity as your potential would offer. So in a way, I think it's responsibility of the leader to take care that the atmosphere in a team is as positive and as growth mindset-y as possible.
Right.
Just to make sure our brains function at our highest potential. And this has nothing to do with kind of toxic positivity or things like that. It's yes, we do have complex and hard issues to tackle and things to solve, and exactly that's the reason why we need to put ourselves in this positive state, because otherwise we are not able to tap into our full potential. So it's in a
Yeah.
way just brain hygiene. um, so
Like,
to frame it in this positive way. And even when I listen to you using this word yet, I could experience the difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I like what you're saying as far as the it's not being toxic with our positivity. It's being functional. It's being effective.
Hmm.
So for instance, I mean, if a person feels like they're being attacked, as you mentioned, that
Hmm.
sympathetic part of the brain comes into action, and so they either retreat or they fight. And that's not being productive, right? And when you're trying to solve an issue together, and it limits your thinking in a way where your mind is distracted by preserving self instead of or fixing the issue. And so I think that it seems so obvious when we think about it as an irrational way, but it's quite difficult in the heat of the moment for sure. Now, is there techniques that you teach your leaders as far as how to harness the moment, catch themselves when they may be feeling angry or being unproductive in a conversation?
Yeah, I think the really key is to increase our self-awareness. So we
Mhm.
need to be more keenly aware of what's going on, what's going on in my brain, what's going on an emotional basis. So what are the urges I experience, and then create some distance and not react in an automatic way and let the anger get our best, but instead shift then to a to my better self, and
Mhm.
to a more positive one, because the negative is the default and we are just hardwired, right? The fight, flight, freeze sympathetic nervous system, this is just our brain doing its job, right? It's
Yeah.
the job of our brain keeping us safe and alive. If our ancestors didn't have these automatic reactions, we wouldn't be sitting here and talking, right? So it was crucial for our survival, but now it's not so helpful anymore, particularly in the working
Mhm.
context. And actually the biological mechanisms, they are the same. So in former times it was a saber-toothed tiger
Yeah.
behind the bush, but now it's my team lead frowning and looking at me, and I have the feeling, oh, my presentation there was didn't go well, I did something wrong, and then I kind of feel attacked, or I feel I need to defend myself, and that's not at all helpful. And these, yeah, human beings are quite sensitive, so really tune into what's going on this emotional basis, and then always shifting towards a better, more positive state. And
Mm.
that's a deliberate practice which can't be done without much better self-awareness than what I currently see usually commonly in leaders.
Okay. Well, let's talk about having that positive mindset, that positive mindset, but applying it in the team environment. So when we're thinking about developing teams that are cohesive, teams that feel like they can be themselves together, to have constructive disagreements, and but still have that growth mindset set to move forward with. How is that fostered?
I think there are many things you can do. And once you foster self-awareness in everyone and foster a positive kind of language, that's very helpful. There are also tiny things you can do which are, again, very powerful. And that's something, for example, I practice also with my co-author Minette. Um, Instead of, for example, saying yes, but, what is our natural default? Saying yes, and.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, similar to the not yet, we discussed earlier. It seems so small, and maybe people might think, that's only a rhetoric. No, try it out, and then you'll experience the difference. What happens if you say yes, but you kind of dismiss what you heard and kind of destroy what the other person contributed and come with your own contribution. If you yes and, then you can use it as stepping stones, and maybe you start with a stupid idea, but if you then go yes and, you might end with a brilliant one. And I think this is a small little practice that teams can really practice and do, and that can change the whole atmosphere and the whole way they are interacting with each other.
So as a leader observes the team going through a dialogue and having a conversation, and they may be hearing, for instance, yes, buts in the conversation, is there a way for them to gracefully go into the conversation and guide it to better behavior?
I think what I've seen is what works best if the team really takes the time for this kind of meta conversation. So probably it wouldn't work if the leader now is convinced, okay, growth mindset, okay, these little twists in the language, and then tries to impose this on the team. It's probably better that if the team takes the time to really discuss and look at the way they are usually running their meetings, the common way they are talking to each other, and so on, and then finding their own agreements. And what I've seen oftentimes is oftentimes you think you don't have the time to kind of stop your daily business and do this kind of meta conversation and finding the team agreements, but that's really, I think, like this man in the woods who are trying to cut the trees, and his axe is not sharp anymore, and he says, I don't have time to sharpen my axe. That doesn't make sense, right? From time to time we do have to take the time to sharpen our axe, and I think a team conversation about how do we want to interact with each other is a very valuable conversation to have. And I've seen teams who come up with agreements, okay, let's not destroy our ideas, but let's practice yes and things like that. But it's only working if the team really comes up with their own agreements everyone buys into. It can't be something which comes top down and is imposed onto them, I think.
Okay. Well, with some of these constructive meta conversations that you're talking about, where you're talking about the rules of the team, when should that occur, and what does that look like?
This can occur anytime. It can be part of a team offsite. It can be okay. Maybe you have a little feedback survey or pulse check. How happy are we with our team meetings? And often oftentimes we spend so much time in meetings, and it turns out that people are not really happy and think the meetings could be much more productive. And then it might be a good reason to say, okay, here 80% of us are not happy with the way the meetings are going. Let's have a conversation about how we do our meetings and how we interact with each other. So it can be any time, I think, and it can be targeted to the kind of meeting you are talking about, all hands meeting, weeklies, dailies, whatever.
And so, Karolin, is this a thing that you orchestrate, that you help companies with? Do you provide this guidance?
Yeah,
this type of training?
Yeah, as a leadership consultant, I'm happy to support clients in any aspect of these kind of soft skills or power skills, growth mindset, psychological safety, whatever it is. And I often support teams to find these kinds of agreements. So whenever I'm coming into a company, it's by definition already kind of this meta conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because when I'm spending time with the team, it's not their usual daily business, and it's a brilliant opportunity to generate these team agreements that they can then later really put into practice.
Now, sometimes with teams and then working with other teams across the organization, there may be some inherent conflict. Where there always seems like you're working against another team in another department or so forth. And at times in organizations, I see this go on and on for too long. So, how do you, as a leader, how do you recognize a situation like this and come to a resolution when you're seeing two parts of the organization, being unproductive or fighting, or not working together? How do you move towards a growth mindset in the organization when that happens?
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant aspect which is happening so often. I see these silos and us against them, and we from innovation against those from controlling. And I think it's a good idea for leaders to raise their awareness level for such us against them things happening. And I think there are many things that could be helpful here. For example, realigning on the common purpose and the common values, and understanding it's not marketing against innovation. No, it's our company, and we have this shared purpose and the shared values, in creating this feeling of, okay, we are all belonging together. And this can be done as kind of purpose, value for the whole company across teams, but it can also apply to single persons, understanding, okay, it's not me with my personal agenda and I'm fighting my colleague from controlling. No, he's a human being like I am a human being. So we can train our empathy, we can train our compassion, and that can opening a completely different way of interacting, which leads to much more productive outcomes. I remember one person who was working in product innovation, and she was actually, it was innovation versus controlling. She was kind of depending on a colleague from controlling, and then they really didn't come along. And she noticed, she told me she noticed that her heartbeat raised when she entered the room, and it was unproductive and awful, and it kind of a fight. And then she thought and reflected on that and thought, this is not at all productive, and I want to change something. And she started really with these empathy practices, just like me practice and things like that. And it really shifted how they work together. Are they best friends? No, they won't become best friends, but they discovered common ground, and it kind of softened the fight, the fronts which were fighting one against the other. It was more, okay, let's figure this out together.
At a situation like that, one of my clients several years ago, they had the recruiting or their talent acquisition department was getting getting heat from the executive team because they weren't filling roles fast enough. They weren't bringing people into the organization fast enough to hire. And then at the same time, the executive team were being very hard on the compensation department because they weren't holding managers to the pay ranges. And so because what was happening is that recruiting or the talent acquisition, they realized that they could bring in candidates much faster if they targeted really high in the pay range and didn't negotiate for those lower pay areas. And then compensation was looked at as the bad guy or the bad person in conflict with recruiting. And so I think that sometimes goals or leadership can unwillingly or unaware set certain parts of the organization against one another. And then it's important to identify that and find ways to resolve that effectively. Now, one thing that this leader did, I mean, because this got down to the point where people were just didn't want to work together with each other. They didn't want to work with their colleague in talent acquisition versus their colleague in compensation. But then the exercise that was done by the leader was saying, okay, well, we need to recognize the goals of each part of the organization and find out how we can put those goals together to bring in the best people for the organization in a way where people feel valued and so forth. And so they started on an exercise by saying, okay, well, I want you to think about, what so-and-so is dealing with in their particular world and thinking about what you would be if you can put yourself in their shoes. In some organizations, this wasn't the same organization, but in some organizations, even had people switch roles for a period of time to understand the complexities of what was going on in that other department, to live a day in their shoes, for instance. So I thought those were kind of interesting.
Yeah, this is so helpful to really these job visits, right? That you visit the other silo and suddenly you have a completely different perspective. And what you mentioned, I think that's also something companies can be more aware of if there are systems and processes which foster this those against the others, for example, compensation systems or KPIs. Sometimes it's not really aligned with the overall goal. And then it's clear that the one division works against the other division.
Right.
And it doesn't really make sense. But from their perspective, with their KPIs and with their performance reviews and what they are aiming for, it makes completely sense. But then you have pre-programmed conflict, of course.
Right. Well, I know that we've been talking about a lot of elements here in keeping a growth mindset and coaching leaders towards this and assisting in the team and so forth. So Karolin, when we think about what you want our leaders to walk away from this discussion, what are the core pieces that you think are most important for them to hear?
Maybe an important message is that it's often the small things which we can do on a daily basis, which can have a huge impact. So maybe growth mindset sounds like, oh my goodness, that's a big concept. I need to dedicate a lot of time to that. No, it's really the small things. Being more aware, self-aware, what's happening, also on an emotional level, and then shifting deliberately and using small things which are fitting your style. And you can experiment with. Is it this little powerful word yet or yes and, or finding your own style of leadership in what's helping you to bring your own brain and the brain of the people around you in a positive state.
Great. Well, thank you. Now, I know, Karolin, that you're an author and you've written a book, and I know you're working on another. But for our leaders out there that want to learn more techniques and so forth, what would you refer them to?
Techniques in terms of growth mindset.
Growth mindset and developing more cohesive teams.
Yeah. Go to my website, karolinhelbig.com. We have a website for the book about psychological safety, so the psychological safety playbook. And little tweaks about the growth. I'm fond of the original book by Carol Dweck, Mindset, The Power of Mindset, and there is so much in that. It's not a practical book written for leaders and meant, okay, these are the little bits and pieces you can take and apply right away. But I know a leader who read the book multiple times, and every time extracted even more for her own leadership practice out of the book. It's really such a powerful thing, which applies to all areas of our life. So whatever we are doing, be it at work with our team or at home with our spouses, I think there's a lot of wisdom, and that's not too long. I'm sure that any leader can benefit hugely. And another idea could also be Satya Nadella, who applied growth mindset at Microsoft and really shifted the whole culture of the company. And he also wrote a fabulous book, Hit Refresh. And that's maybe something which might be interesting to leaders in particular, because it's in a way growth mindset applied. And yeah, he's really role modeling a growth mindset, being okay, admitting mistakes in public, for example, things like that.
Great recommendations. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on the show today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Karolin.
Yeah, I was happy to be here and talking to you and exploring growth mindset. I mean, this concept has been around for quite some time, but I think there is so much power in it, and we can keep unpacking this concept.
Right. Well, for all those that are listening in, all those leaders out there, I hope this was helpful to you, and we'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. So take care.